Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode into the question and answer session of today's call. At that time, if you would like to ask a question, you may do so by pressing star 1. Today's meeting is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I now would like to turn the meeting over to Mr. Nathan Oley. You may begin, sir.
Welcome and thank you very much for joining us today. We're here today to talk about the 2016 budget for the Economic Development Administration. Very happy and pleased that we have Assistant Secretary Jay Williams here with us today to go over our budget, and certainly we'll have time for questions at the end. As the operator indicated, at the end I will prompt to allow folks to ask questions over the phone or online if you are viewing this via your computer. Thank you again for being here, and I'll hand it over to Jay.
Thank you, Nathan. And I would also like to thank all of our stakeholders for joining us to talk about and walk through our 2016 budget. Also joining us here at our headquarters are the members of our budget staff, senior members of our budget team, so they will assist in answering any of your questions as we go through the process. That being the case, 2015 marks the 50th year of EDA's existence as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Economic Development Administration. It's important that we recognize that the economic development landscape has changed significantly over those 50 years, and in order for us to remain relevant and effective, it was required that we would also change. But what has not changed in that 50 years is the commitment that we have to making investments that are important to our core communities, that assist them in facilitating job creation, that spur local innovation and entrepreneurship. One of the things that Secretary Pritzker asked me to do along with the senior team when I joined about a year ago was to just take a look at the priorities of EDA and make sure that those priorities were relevant and that they would be impactful for the duration of this administration. And one of the things that we did, along with talking to very key stakeholders, many of you who are represented here today on this webinar and others, we came up with 3 overarching priorities that we keep in mind as we go forward in all of the activities that we're engaged in. First and foremost, making sure that the programs that EDA has engaged in, the programs that are 50 years old and the programs that started in more recent years, are aligned with the needs of our constituent communities, and that those programs are also impactful. Second, the overarching priority is continually to strive for operational excellence, or the continuous improvement of EDA, our operations, engagement with our staff and other stakeholders. And then the third priority, which speaks directly to why we're having this webinar, is making sure that we have a ongoing and robust engagement with our stakeholders, those that have been with us for a number of years and those that we seek to expand during the last 2 years of this administration. The demand for the investments of EDA has remained strong, and a good example of that is over the 5-year period between 2009 and 2013, we received over 1,400 grant applications each year. In fiscal year 2013, we were able to fund 670 of those applications, but as you can see, the demand of the 1,400 applications exceeded $2.5 billion, and our appropriation for fiscal year 2013 was only $183 million. So while we were certainly appreciative of the $183 million, you can see that the demand for the investments from this agency far outpaces our ability to fund those investments. Our budget priority for 2016 continues to empower regions to develop and implement their own plans that are transformative, bottoms-up strategies that are put together and prioritized by the stakeholders on the ground. EDA's budget priority is consistent with the priorities set forward by Secretary Pritzker in her Open for Business Department of Commerce agenda. Again, we want to continue to enable investments that support 21st century economic development, spur innovation, and also incorporate resilience planning. I would use the term flexibility and balance to describe our approach this year and actually for the next 2 years. And one of the things that we're happy and excited to talk about is the fact that EDA's experience in integrating resources across the federal government will be more relevant and more at play this year and the next. our investment priorities are similar, actually identical to what you've seen in the past. Making sure that we have collaborative regional innovations, making sure that we also continue to invest in public-private partnerships, national strategic priorities, and global competitiveness, environmentally sustained development, and obviously, true to our mission, economically distressed and underserved communities throughout the country. This next slide really demonstrates EDA at its best. If you understand the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the top of that pyramid are the connected ecosystems that we would certainly love to see all communities have as a part of their economic environment. At the bottom of the pyramid, you see the basic infrastructure, and along the continuum of the pyramid, you see those inputs that are necessary to ultimately create communities that are globally competitive, communities that are attractive to private investment, which ultimately creates the jobs. And EDA is able to provide those inputs and help to bring together stakeholders, and not just our own investments, but to attract private investment that really assist communities along that continuum. Again, whether they're at the bottom of the pyramid and just trying to figure out the basic infrastructure or the planning needs, or those communities that are able to move up. And it also acknowledges that there are many other players within a connected ecosystem that ultimately create the success that we aspire to see in the communities that we serve. Our budget table reflects that public works remains a core component and a significant priority within EDA. Our public works budget has approximated between 85 and 90 million, upwards of $100 million each year, and it still remains by far the largest component of our budget. It does reflect a reduction of $14 million from last year's budget request, and that's because we think that having the additional flexibility within our budget is something that is of significant importance to our stakeholders, and we'll talk about that more in just a minute. You'll also see a significant increase, over a 30% increase in our partnership planning. That's exceptionally important because we aspire to fund 100% of the economic development districts and help them refresh their plans and incorporate some additional components as we move forward in fiscal year, both 15 and actually fiscal year 16 in particular. You'll see the second largest component of our budget is our Economic Assistance Program, or EAA. It's our most flexible funding. It allows us to do things that we would do in public works, but it allows us to do a whole range of other things. And you'll see an $8 million increase request in EAA, again, providing that flexibility and that balance that is so important to our stakeholders. Our regional innovation strategies has been an important part of our core programs over the past 3 to 4 years. We had a significant demand for our regional innovation competition funding this year. In fact, out of a $15 million offering, we had over $100 million in demand. So you can see that that has proven to be of great importance to our stakeholders, and we want that to be reflected in the increased budget request. And then I'll draw your attention down to the salaries and expenses, and we'll speak to this in terms of our ability to, or our desire to put more boots on the ground in communities across the country so we can be more responsive to the needs of the communities that we serve, and also to assist us in the integrator role that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. So the next slides just go into detail about the priorities that we talked about. We've heard time and time again from the stakeholders across the country and from our important stakeholders on the Hill that the public works investments that EDA makes continue to be important, continue to attract additional private investment, are job creators, and we're proud of that, and you should not expect anything different as we continue to move forward. Talked about the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, providing that balance, that flexibility, and allowing us to really tailor the approach that I think is one of the hallmarks of EDA, is our ability to be responsive to the specific needs of the communities, and our EAA program is a fundamental tool that we use in doing that. The partnership planning, our ability to fund, again, 100% of the economic development districts, and to assist you in providing a refresh of those plans. Our CEDS, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategies, are a fundamental part of the relationship with EDA. We've also seen some success in working with other agencies and getting them to allow equivalence of SEDS plans to be accepted in terms of funding in other federal agencies. So the more we get those SEDS integrated into not only the communities that are part of the EDA family, but getting other federal agencies to recognize and accept that as an equivalency, I think that, again, bodes well for our constituent communities. Talked about our Regional Innovation Strategies Program. Julie Kirk and her team have done a wonderful job in helping really to bring those to a more prominent place within EDA. It's fair to say that these should be considered a part of our core offerings. Now, I think it also reflects EDA's pivot to making sure that we remain relevant. So 50 years of doing public works and planning and technical assistance are exceptionally important, and we'll continue to do that. But I think it's fair to say that we also want to make sure that we offer things that continue to move communities along that economic continuum that we talked about and allow them to be more globally competitive. And a perfect way to do that is through our Regional Innovation Strategies program. Talked about the salaries and expenses in the table, and want to, again, just reiterate the fact that this is reflective of our desire to put more boots on the ground to make sure that our regional offices, where 2/3 of the EDA staff exists out in the regional offices, and they do a wonderful job traveling the country, being responsive to the communities that we serve, and we want to make sure that that remains a priority in terms of the staffing. Certainly there will be some staffing filling going on here in headquarters, but the majority of the additional staff will be out in the regions where they are closest to our stakeholders. So in 2016, EDA, as I talked about, will be playing an ascending role in the President's agenda with respect to helping to coordinate all of the federal economic investments that happen across the U.S. government, including the Power Plus initiative, which is the administration's response to the transition that is underway in coal-reliant communities. But we're not going to wait until 2016. And based on the experience that we have in helping to coordinate resources, helping to bring stakeholders together to address sudden and severe economic disruption, EDA has been tapped to coordinate and lead the Power Initiative. Specifically, the Power Initiative, as I talked about, is the administration's response to those communities that are undergoing economic transition as we see the transition away from fossil fuels. And it's very similar to the administration's response when we saw the decline in the auto industry. It would have been wonderful, and I've used this example in the past, that being a former mayor of Youngstown, Ohio, although I wasn't the mayor in the 70s, obviously, but in the 70s when the steel industry collapsed in Youngstown, Ohio, there was no coordinated federal response. And as a result, it took Youngstown 25 or 30 years to come to grips and come to terms with the fact that there was a path forward, but that path forward wasn't going to happen by the city simply waiting around for something to fill that vacuum that the steel industry held for so long. So this Power Initiative that EDA is going to be leading really speaks to the strength and experience that we have in integrating federal resources, integrating other resources, even from the private sector and other stakeholders, to respond to the communities, particularly as it relates to those communities, again, that are going to be transitioning away from the fossil fuels. And we appreciate the relationship with NACO and NATO and so many of the other stakeholders that are assisting us in helping to bring this initiative to bear. The Power Initiative that I talked about really is the lead-in to our role as an integrator, and this goes to the notion that I referred to as EDA playing a more prominent role in the federal government's economic development initiatives. HUD, Department of Transportation, EPA, any number of federal agencies have a place and have resources that they dedicate toward economic development. Now, EDA is not going to funnel all of those resources. The $17+ billion that the federal government directs toward economic development isn't all going to flow through EDA, but EDA has been tapped with helping to coordinate and put its experience to use and to making sure that those resources are better leveraged. The more coordinated those resources happen to flow through the communities, the more mileage that the federal government gets, and the more private investment that ultimately will be attracted. And it's that private investment that really facilitates the job creation. So we're excited about this role for EDA. again, I think it's reflective of the fact that for the next 50 years, hopefully, we'll be as relevant and impactful moving forward as we have been for the past 50 years. And it really speaks to a growing commitment of this administration, both obviously starting at the White House with the President, but also with Secretary Pritzker of Commerce, to making sure that we are responsive to the needs of the agency, making sure that we make it as efficient and as effective as possible to deal with the federal government. And by having EDA lead that role, I think that is certainly a success that we hope to see in the communities in fiscal year 16, but that's actually starting, as I talked about, with our role in the Power Initiative this year in 2015. So that concludes the formal part of our presentation, and we would like to, I'm going to turn it back over to Nathan to open up for questions as it relates to anything that we talked about here. Again, our budget staff is here. We're happy to talk about policy, but I want to thank you for the support that we've been provided through this relationship with our stakeholders. We're excited about this year and next year, and we hope that the feedback that we get will continue to help us guide the policies and the decisions that we make. So I'll turn it back over to Nathan.
Thank you very much, Jay, and just wanted to encourage all of you to continue to keep up to date with everything that we have going on here at EDA through our website at www.eda.gov or our Twitter or Facebook accounts. We will have more information coming in future months, but certainly please keep touch with us and let us know what's going on in your local communities as well through those avenues. At this time, I would like to open up the floor for questions, and Simone, the moderator, will let you know how you can submit a question for Jay or our budget team.
Certainly. At this time, if you would like to ask a question, you may do so at this time. Simply press *1. Please record your first and last name clearly when prompted, as your name is required to introduce the question. To withdraw a question, simply press *2. Once again, at this time, if you would like to ask a question, simply press *1, please.
And really quickly, there is one question that came up about the slideshow and the webinar being available. We will make these available on our website, probably up sometime tomorrow afternoon.
And there are no questions in queue at this time.
We did receive a couple questions online, so while you folks are gathering your questions, I'll go ahead and ask a couple of these. One of them is there a sweet spot for the dollar amount requested via regional innovation grants?
No, I don't necessarily think that there's a sweet spot. One of the things that we've heard from Julie, and she's on the road, is it's really about tailoring those regional innovation grants to meet the needs of the community, showing that there is a commitment of, for those components that require matching dollars, showing that there's a commitment of those matching dollars, making a very strong and compelling case as to how that investment will move the needle. So there isn't a particular sweet spot. You know, we've got some communities that request a maximum that are available. We have other communities that request differing amounts. So it's really about tailoring it and showing, making a compelling case that the investment dollars that would come from EDA would move the needle and help create an environment that is more globally competitive on the ground in that particular community.
Another question that came in online is, when you speak of power helping communities transition away from coal, can assistance help in a transition from coal to natural gas?
Absolutely. So when we talk about a transition to coal, and that's a great question, some communities are going to be able to transition to other of the energy sources that the President has talked about. The U.S. approach under the President is an all-of-the-above strategy. So while fossil fuel is a part of that, it won't be as prominent as a part as it has been in the past. The President has talked about natural gas, renewables, nuclear will continue to be a part of it. So for those communities that are looking to transition from fossil fuels to another energy source, power absolutely addresses that. But for those communities that are looking to transition from fossil fuels to something completely different, again, the planning assistance, the implementation assistance is also available to those communities.
The next question is, we value the partnerships and services provided by EDA. However, it seems the total annual budget has been steadily decreasing. What can we do as an economic development district to advocate with you for more funds?
You're right. We are in an environment of declining resources as we've seen the impact of the sequester legislation that was passed a few years ago, it is something that is painful. As a matter of fact, the President has said that it is time to move away from what he has called mindless austerity that has really hampered and inhibited our ability to make the investments that we think are important, that attract the private investment that ultimately creates those jobs. So, again, making your voices known, one of the things that we attempt to do is to demonstrate the success of our programs and investments in areas across the country. One of the best ways to demonstrate that is to show the private investment that was attracted as a result of the public investment, to show the jobs that were created, to show how those communities have become more competitive. So the more that you all demonstrate that in your communities, the better and more compelling case we are able to make to those that ultimately are in the position to make those investment decisions.
The next question is, how interested is EDA in supporting the growing makerspace movement as a means of creating light manufacturing and tech startups?
Very interested, and again, I'll refer to Julie Kirk, who is a former, or as she says, a recovering entrepreneur herself. She and her staff, in terms of helping to facilitate and foster innovation on the ground. We were participatory in the White House's Makers Fair several months ago. I had an opportunity to meet with several mayors and other local officials who were excited about establishing makerspace in their respective communities. So it is something that is a priority, and again, Julie Kirk and her staff are always eager to talk to communities more specifically about how EDA can support that.
We've had a couple questions come in about the salary and expense piece, and specifically the breakdown of new positions and how many will be in regional offices. Sure.
Yeah, I'll ask Andy to cover that.
So, in particular, what's particular about the Power Plus, the integrators we're talking about, the majority, so 6, there would be 1 in each regional office and 3 in the headquarters. So about a 60-30 split, or a 75-25 split, I guess.
Great. The next question comes from Bill Schaefer. Are there funds available for tribes to develop comprehensive planning documents, and if so, what programs should they be directed to when making an application or investigating the possibility?
Absolutely, there are funds available to assist tribes, and our partnership planning line item is primarily where those funds come from, although EAA can also be used for it. So we would very much encourage our tribal communities to reach out to your respective regional offices. If you go to our website at eda.gov, you will be able to find a map that shows the 6 regional offices. So we would very much encourage you to reach out, and if you have any difficulty, by all means, you're always encouraged and welcome to reach out to headquarters.
I think that's it for questions online. Are there any from the phone?
Yes. First question comes from Keenan Stone. Keenan, your line is open.
Hello. My question is, has there been any funding added for different types of projects, such as infrastructure for industrial sites? And number 2, what qualifies an applicant for public works and EAA grant? Thank you.
Certainly. In terms of infrastructure and industrial parks, that's where our public works program and our EAA, or the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, projects would be eligible, assuming they meet all the other criteria, would be eligible under those 2 programs. In terms of communities eligibility, a couple of things. For Public Works and EAA, a CEDS is required, a comprehensive economic development strategy, and then overall for eligibility for EDA funding, there is an economic distress test that is applied. So assuming that those 2 things are met, then the projects are judged on their merit. It is a competitive process. The funding decisions are made out in the region, so depending on where you are geographically in the U.S., you would submit your request to that regional office. One of the unique things that I think is unique about EDA is that prior to submitting any request for funding, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to your regional offices, because the staff there is in a position to really work with you and help you walk through the process of putting a very competitive application together. Ultimately, it still goes before an investment review committee for competitive evaluation, but to the extent that EDA staff can and really are charged with helping communities put together a competitive project. I think that's something that's unique. There's not a whole lot of places where they can provide you the technical assistance in a very intimate and closely aligned way that would ultimately help you put together the most competitive project that you can. So please reach out to your regional office. They can talk more specifically about how to put together a project, and I would very much, again, encourage you to do that prior to going through the considerable effort that is necessary to put together a competitive application.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Eric Cousins. Eric, your line is open.
Thank you. We've seen Auburn go from the busiest dry goods port in Maine with the Port of Auburn and intermodal facility and rail connections from Auburn through New Hampshire and Vermont to Montreal, and then from Montreal to Vancouver or Halifax. And due to a lack of investment in the segment from Montreal to Auburn, our weight restrictions now make us no longer competitive, and we've lost that status. We're losing freight shipments, substantial amounts of freight shipments, because Canadian National still charges the same rates for a single rate between Halifax and Auburn or Vancouver and Auburn. Will there be any programs available for rail investment that might help upgrade rail lines to be competitive?
Well, certainly. Again, our Public Works program is able to address investments like that with respect to infrastructure in addition to our economic adjustments. So while there aren't specific programs that are directed toward rail, the fact that Public Works investments and infrastructure investments are an ongoing priority of the Economic Development Administration means that that's where, and in your particular instance, the Philadelphia office covers your region, so that's where a conversation with Philadelphia with respect to those particular challenges would be welcome.
Thank you.
At this time, if you would like to ask a question, you may do so by pressing *1. Please record your first and last name clearly, as your name is required to introduce the question. To withdraw your question, simply press *2. Once again, at this time, you may press *1 to ask a question.
So we do have one more additional question online that we'll take while we're waiting to see if anyone else on the phone has a question. And this says, we're seeing a lot of project activity in food production and supply chain development for local healthy foods. To us in a large metropolitan area, this is a health issue, an equity issue, and a jobs development issue. Are we seeing proposals coming into EDA reflecting this new emphasis?
Actually, we are. In our Investing in Manufacturing Communities Partnership, our IMCP competition, one of the communities that was designated as an IMCP community actually did focus on being a food hub. So interestingly enough, when people think of manufacturing, food hubs weren't necessarily the first thing that would come to mind, but they did put in a competitive and ultimately very successful application. So that has been something we've seen. In addition to some of the investments through our regional offices has focused on food production, eliminating food deserts as a component of not only economic development, but as you correctly pointed out, it addresses health and social equity and a whole host of other things. So we do have some experience in that, and again, would welcome competitive applications along those lines.
Were there any additional questions on the phone?
Yes, one moment, please. Our next question comes from Nolan Cloud. Nolan, your line is open.
Yes, I direct the University of Alaska Center for Economic Development, and I was just curious if there are any major funding initiatives on the horizon or any programmatic changes that are anticipated to affect the University Center program.
In terms of the University Centers, that continues to be an important component. I don't anticipate anything on the horizon that would substantially adversely impact the University Centers program.
Were there any additional questions on the phone?
There are no further questions in queue at this time.
If not, I want to thank everyone very much for participating today. Did want to reemphasize that we will put this webinar up and the slides that accompany it up on our website probably by tomorrow afternoon, so please feel free to access those. and continue to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for continued updates from EDA. Thank you very much for your time today, and certainly thank you to Assistant Secretary Williams for his participation.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you all for joining us.
This now concludes today's meeting. All lines, please disconnect at this time.